The 95th Regiment of Foot, famously known as the Rifles, holds an esteemed place in British military history, particularly for its role in the Napoleonic Wars. Unlike the majority of British infantry, who wielded smoothbore muskets, the 95th was armed with rifles, granting them superior accuracy and range. This elite regiment has been well documented through the journals and letters of its soldiers, particularly those of the 1st Battalion, which has produced an exceptional number of published accounts. Now, another remarkable first-hand account emerges, after 2 centuries, revealing the experiences of an officer whose story is made even more intriguing by his American origins. James Penman Gairdner, born in Charleston, South Carolina, served with the 95th Rifles from 1812 to 1815, enduring the grueling campaigns of the Peninsular War and later the legendary Battle of Waterloo. His service, spanning major conflicts and the subsequent occupation of France, was marked by remarkable resilience, having been wounded 3 times in battle. Gairdner meticulously recorded his experiences in a series of small, leather-bound journals. Written daily, these accounts capture the raw immediacy of battle, the hardships of military life, and the confusions of war. Unlike memoirs revised with the benefit of hindsight, these journals provide an unfiltered, contemporary view of events as they unfolded. Despite minor later revisions, Gairdner's writing remains a rare and valuable insight into the life of a rifle officer on the front lines. Preserved at the National Army Museum in Chelsea, these journals face the relentless march of time, with some sections fading almost beyond recognition. However, through painstaking effort and advanced restoration techniques, the editor has managed to salvage and transcribe the full text before it is lost forever. This effort is particularly significant for the 1815 journal, whose deterioration had reached a critical point. Beyond its military insights, Gairdner's writings illuminate the complex identity struggles of Anglo-American families in the post-revolutionary era. His correspondence with his father in Georgia reveals the blurred national loyalties that persisted even after America's independence. Family ties often took precedence over national allegiances, and these letters provide a unique window into the era's divided loyalties. The importance of this discovery cannot be overstated. For too long, Gairdner's journals have remained overlooked, despite offering one of the most personal and vivid narratives of Napoleonic-era soldiering. Their publication is a long overdue addition to the historical record, finally granting Gairdner his place among the most notable chroniclers of the 95th Rifles. The story of James Penman Gairdner begins with his family's roots in the Scottish mercantile trade, which thrived in the American South, particularly in Charleston. His father, a successful trader, established a prominent business in the city, but family affairs were not without turbulence. His uncle Edwin's financial dealings led to bankruptcy and court battles, creating a backdrop of economic and legal turmoil. Despite these difficulties, the Gairdners remained a well-connected and influential family, maintaining strong transatlantic ties. Born in 1792, James was sent to England at the age of 12 for his education, likely attending Harrow School. His father intended for him to follow a mercantile career, but young James had other ambitions. Drawn to the life of a soldier, he secured a commission in the 95th Rifles in 1810, joining as a second lieutenant without purchase, a rare opportunity in the highly competitive British Army. Gairdner's enlistment marked the beginning of an adventurous military career. He trained in the unique tactics of the Rifles, learning to fight in open-order skirmishing formations, unlike the traditional line infantry. This specialized training emphasized individual marksmanship, quick decision-making, and battlefield mobility. Letters to his father reveal his excitement and determination, as well as his father's financial guidance, warnings against debt, and encouragement to continue his studies in languages and military strategy. By early 1812, Gairdner's path took a dramatic turn. With the British Army deeply engaged in the Peninsular War, he was reassigned to the 1st Battalion of the 95th Rifles, already entrenched in the brutal conflict against Napoleon's forces in Spain. His journey to the front lines was just the beginning of an extraordinary tale of survival, duty, and historical significance, one captured in his own words, now preserved for history. As the brutal winter of 1812 gripped the Iberian Peninsula, the Duke of Wellington prepared to strike a decisive blow against the French. For months, his forces had been quietly stockpiling siege guns, cannonballs, and barrels of gunpowder, while troops busied themselves fashioning fascines and scaling ladders. The target was Ciudad Rodrigo, a formidable fortress that guarded the northern gateway into Portugal, a key strategic stronghold in Napoleon's grip on Spain. With the French army scattered across the region and unable to mount a swift response, Wellington seized his moment. On 5th of January, his well-drilled divisions began their advance, braving the freezing winds and treacherous terrain. 3 days later, on 8th of January, the British and Portuguese forces completed their encirclement of the city. The siege had begun. That very night, in a show of relentless aggression, the redoubt Renault, one of the fortress's key outer defenses, fell in a daring assault, setting the stage for the bloody battle to come. This is Gairdner's journal. These are his words. Let's begin. January 14th. The batteries opened on the town this day at 5 o'clock. 15th. Blank. 16th. It being the turn of our division to take the trench duty this day, we marched in the morning before daybreak to relieve the 4th Division. The 1st Brigade went into the trenches in the morning, and we relieved them at about 5 o'clock. I was sent with the command of a party to fire into the breach, and this night was the first time I ever saw a shot fired in anger. General Crawford went in today with a flag of truce to the governor, summoning him to surrender, to which he returned a bravadoing answer that he would be buried in the ruins first or something to that effect. 17th. Marched home again to El Bodón. We this evening received an order to hold ourselves in readiness to march tomorrow to the trenches. All the ladders in this place have been embargoed today. 18th. Did not march today but received an order to march tomorrow to the convent of La Caridad and halt there until further orders. The company James belonged to mounted the breach and turned right in an attempt to clear the ramparts of the enemy and reach the main breach, which the 3rd Division was busy attacking. This movement was achieved successfully, but the explosion of a mine at the main breach changed everything. 19th. Marched before daybreak to La Caridad, where we remained for some hours. The officers and men of the Forlorn Hope and storming party volunteered here. We then moved on to the campground near the trenches, where we remained until dark. Soon after dark, we moved up to the convent close to the town, from whence we moved on to the breach. There were 2 breaches, one was stormed by our division, the other by the 3rd Division, the division on duty in the trenches at the time. Poor Uniacke was blown up by a mine that was sprung near the larger breach. We remained in the town all night, which, like every night, was dreadfully cold. General Crawford received a dangerous wound tonight, and General Vandeleur a slight one. The rush siege caused heavy losses at the storming. The Light Division suffered 1 officer and 11 men killed, and 11 officers and 90 men wounded. The 95th, of which all 3 battalions had contingents present, suffered 2/3 of this loss. Private Edward Costello recorded the devastation at the main breach the following morning. The sight was heartrending in the extreme. The dead lay in heaps, numbers of them stripped. They displayed the most ghastly wounds. Here and there, half buried under the blackened fragments of the wall, or reeking on the surface of the ruin, lay those who had been blown up in the explosions, their remains dreadfully mangled and discolored. Strewed about were dissevered arms and legs. 20th. Marched back to El Bodón, met the 5th Division on our way, marching to Rodrigo. 21st to 23rd. Blank. 24th. Heard today that poor Uniacke died this morning early. 25th. Marched with the company and band to Gallegos de Arganin to attend poor Uniacke's funeral. 26th. Received an order this evening to march tomorrow morning to Fuentiguinaldo. 27th. Marched at 8 o'clock this morning. I was on baggage guard. Rained very hard and all day. 28th. Blank. 29th. Were obliged to quit our quarters, Smith and myself, on account of the rain coming in through the roof. 30th to 31st. Blank. Whilst encamped at Ituero, a court-martial was held at Nave de Havre on 12th of February on 18 British soldiers who had deserted and were captured in Ciudad Rodrigo. The execution by firing squad took place soon after. The division formed three sides of a square, the fourth side formed by a large trench, in front of which the convicted men were arranged and shot by a firing squad. It is clear from the evidence of many that it was bungled and that many did not die instantly. It required the firing squad to reload to finish them off, and the provost finished by discharging a pistol into each head. The bodies were then tossed into the mass grave, and the men of the division marched past. February 1st to 25th. We remained all this time at Guinaldo and lived very well. The weather was, for the most part, fine and frosty. We had no marching or bother. The only time that we marched out of the place was one day that the division was ordered to assemble at Ituero de Azaba to be present at the execution of 9 men who had deserted to the enemy from this division and who were condemned to be shot. They were taken in Ciudad Rodrigo on the 19th of January. Colonel Beckwith joined the division during this period, and also a detachment from England for the 1st Battalion, with the following officers: Austin, Bell, and Joseph. The 1st Battalion were, at this period, in España, Ituero de Azaba, Campillo de Azaba, Castillejo de Azaba, and El Bodón. 26th. Received an order last night to march by a route which ends at Castello do Vide. Marched this morning at daylight through Casillas de Flores and Forcaljos to Alfaiates, 3 leagues. General Vandeleur here also. 27th. Marched through Nave, Villaboa, and Sabugal to a small village called Vale Morisco, about a league beyond Sabugal, which our regiment alone occupied. 28th. Marched through Sortella, an old Moorish fortification of very romantic appearance and situation, to Castellero, 3 leagues. Sortella is situated on the side of a steep, rocky mountain. There is in it a castle of very romantic appearance. The country all about it is exceedingly wild, rocky, and uncultivated. We had good quarters at Castellero. Having lost our mess mule at Guinaldo, we bought a mule here for $56. The 52nd and headquarters were at Sortella. 29th. Marched to Capina 3 leagues, a good village. March 1st. Marched to Alpedrina. I went on before the regiment to tell off quarters, and the guide took me across the country without keeping any road. On reaching the top of the Sierra, which surrounds the immense plain in which Castelo Branco stands, I was delighted with the view which burst on me all at once. In the distance was seen Castelo Branco. The side of the Sierra is well wooded, and the whole plain exhibits a contrast of wildness and cultivation. I passed through a very good-looking town called Val de Proceres, about 2 English miles from Alpedrina, which is a very good town. We had excellent quarters there, and most beautifully situated. The whole brigade here. 2nd. Marched through Lardosa to Alcaintes, 2 leagues. The brigade marched together, and we were all in Alcaintes. I saw here for the first time a Portuguese funeral, and a more barbarous, unfeeling sight I have seldom seen. 3rd. The brigade marched to Castelo Branco, 2 leagues. The 1st Brigade, which had been since the commencement of the march moving on a different road, marched in here today. 4th. The 2nd Brigade halted all this day in Castelo Branco. The 1st Brigade marched this morning. It is a dirty, uncomfortable town. There is the ruin of a castle on the highest part of the place. There is also a bishop's palace and garden. 5th. Marched this day to Retaxo, where our regiment was alone, 2 leagues. Headquarters and 52nd at Sarnadas de Rodao. 6th. Marched to Nisa, 5 leagues. Crossed the Tagus by a bridge of boats at Vila Velha de Rodao. The road is very bad indeed, and the pass of Vila Velha is, I should think, very formidable in a military point of view. 7th. Marched to Castello de Vide, 3 leagues, the place our route ended at. When we arrived there, 3 companies forming the left wing were halted and distributed in Quintas about Castello de Vide. The other 3 companies in the headquarters of the regiment went on to Escusa, a village about 2 miles from Castello de Vide. Whilst here, a court-martial was held on Private Joseph Ullman, who had been captured by Spanish guerrillas whilst attempting to cross over to the enemy near Salamanca. Private Costello was actually one of the guards watching over the prisoner the night before his planned execution. Ullman drew his outstanding pay, bought wine for himself and his guards, and swapped his shoes with another guard whose shoes were worn out, saying, "They will last me as long as I shall require them." He was executed on the morning of 10th of March by firing squad. Marching up to his grave in heavy rain, he discovered it to be already waterlogged, when he stated, "Although a watery one, I shall sleep sound enough in it," and declined a blindfold from the provost with, "There is no occasion, I shall not flinch." Having given a kind word to each of those destined to be his executioners, they fired, and his body slumped into the watery pit. 8th to 13th. We remained at this time at Escusa, a very nice little village where we had excellent quarters and were very comfortable indeed. We marched to Castello de Vite one day to see the sentence of death put into execution on Joseph Ullman of our regiment, who was sentenced to be shot for desertion to the enemy. I also walked frequently to Castello de Vite, which is a good town and clean for a Portuguese town. There is not, however, a very good market or any good shops. It has been an old fortified town. Its situation, however, is not good. It has, on one end of it, a citadel cut off and fortified from the town itself. There are some old pieces of cannon lying dismounted on the ramparts, but none mounted in any part. The walls are breached and in ruins in many places. There is also a town called Mervao, about 2 miles from Escusa, very well worth seeing. Indeed, it is situated on a steep, rocky mountain. On one side, the mountain is very high and almost perpendicular. On the other, viz., the side looking towards Spain, the ascent of the mountain, though high, is not so much so or so perpendicular as the other, but the ground is so rocky that to make a trench would be next to an impossibility. There is, in the highest part of the town, a castle that completely commands the town and is in itself inaccessible, except on the side that opens into the town, from the situation of the mountain. On the part in which it is built, the place appears to have been lately repaired. There are several pieces of cannon mounted, most of which are brass and have been brought from Campo Mayor. Mervao is not, however, a regular fortification, there being no bastions, outworks, etc., except in that part of the town which is most accessible, an outer wall with cannon mounted on it. It is, however, from the peculiarity of its situation, in my untutored opinion, impregnable. It is garrisoned by a regiment of Portuguese militia. On entering the town, we were taken by the guard up to the governor's house to obtain permission to visit the place. He gave orders that the British officers should be admitted everywhere. There is, from the castle, a most extensive view. I walked from Escusa to this place several times. It is a very beautiful walk, and the place itself a great curiosity. We received a mail from England while here with the account of the capture of Ciudad Rodrigo. I received while here the first letters I have received since I left England. 14th. Being orderly officer today, I went out at 10 o'clock with the batmen for forage, and on my return at about 2 o'clock, I found that the regiment had marched to Portalegre. There were orders left for me to bring on the baggage to Portalegre. I got off at about 3 o'clock but did not get into Portalegre until after dark. I had an adventure on the road with 2 rascally Portuguese peasants. I remarked that the Portuguese begin to trim their vines about this time. Portalegre is a very fine town, but on account of coming in so late at night and marching out so early the next morning, I did not see so much of it as I wished. General Vandeleur, who since the capture of Rodrigo has been suffering much from his wound and the rheumatism, stopped here. The command of the division devolves on Colonel Beckwith. 15th. The division marched soon after daylight to Aronchish, 4 leagues. Aronchish is a dirty, uncomfortable town. It has formerly been fortified, but its situation in a military point of view is very bad. 16th. The division marched to Elvish, 4 leagues. We here understood that some divisions were already encamped in front of Badajoz and that we are to march tomorrow morning for that place. Elvish is a beautiful fortification, and the town itself is well supplied with everything. 17th. The division marched off at about 8 o'clock this morning to the neighborhood of Badajoz. We crossed the Guadiana by pontoons and found the 3rd and 4th divisions encamped near the town. The 1st and 6th divisions are in front under General Sir T. Graham, and the 2nd and 7th under General Sir R. Hill. The 5th division has not come from the north yet. We understood that we should get tents on the ground, we however have seen none yet. Towards evening, the weather, which since the commencement of our march has been very fine, changed and commenced raining. Valverde was the only officer in the regiment who had a tent, which every officer not on duty crowded into. Working and covering parties were warned early in the evening, and the ground was broken as soon as it was dark. The garrison did not fire at all. 18th to 25th. Everything went on as well as could be expected until the 25th, on which day our batteries opened on the town. The weather was very bad, and the duty pretty frequent. It came to my turn to be on duty on an average twice in 5 days. Colonel Beckwith, who at the time we marched from Elvish was not able to come with us from illness, came in the same evening and was carried off again the next day in a car, so that the command of the division devolved on Lieutenant Colonel Barnard. Major O'Hare, who at the time we marched from Escusa was very ill and followed us slowly, joined on the 19th. The officers got tents the second day, the men some days after. On the 19th, the enemy made a sortie in the morning but were repulsed with loss. On the night of the 19th, Freer of ours, who was on duty in the trenches, was wounded. On the 25th, our batteries opened on the town at about 11 o'clock in the morning. The same night, the outwork called Fort Picurino was stormed. It was carried but with some loss. I was on duty in the trenches the next day and went into the fort. It is wonderfully strong. 26th to 30th. Blank. 31st. The 5th Division, which arrived soon after the commencement of the siege and was posted on the other side of the river, was about this time ordered to the front. The 48th, Richard L. Wood's regiment, arrived during the siege. April 1st to 3rd. Blank. 4th. The town is ordered to be stormed tomorrow. 5th. Editor's note: the following are the heads of the orders relative to the storming of Badajoz, which is ordered to take place at 9 o'clock tonight. The Light Division will storm the breach in the flank of the bastion of Santa Maria. The 4th Division will storm the breach in the face of the bastion of La Caridad. The 3rd Division will escalade at the castle. The 5th Division, which had been sent to the front but had returned, will extend down to the waterside and attract the attention of the garrison by firing. About 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the order for storming was countermanded, and the usual parties for the trench duty were warned. The storming of Badajoz was set for the night of 6th of April. The 3rd Division would attempt to escalade the castle walls, the 5th Division would cause a diversion near the Olivenza Gate, and the 4th and Light Divisions would storm the main breach. The breach, defended with mines and topped with wooden beams encircled with razor-sharp sword blades sticking out in all directions known as chevaux de frise, proved impassable. For 5 hours, the divisions sought to break through without the slightest glimmer of success. Individual officers, forming up 50 or 100 men at a time at the foot of the breach, and endeavoring to carry it by desperate bravery, and fatal as it proved to each gallant band in succession, as fast as one dissolved, another was formed, wrote Johnny Kincaid. The castle being taken, the French ceased defending the breach, and the town was taken and turned over to a disgraceful night of rape and pillage. The 1st Battalion, 95th, lost 3 officers, 3 sergeants, and 24 men killed, with a further 9 officers, 15 sergeants, and 139 men wounded, including our James, who was hit 3 times early in the storm, none of which was serious. Being evacuated, he escaped the dangers of lying at the foot of the breach for hours, where many wounded succumbed to further grenade attacks and the incessant musket fire. Gairdner continues. 6th. Our company was sent to relieve a company of the 52nd on picket near the river at about 12 o'clock this day. At about 6 o'clock, we were ordered to come in and join the regiment at dark as the town is to be stormed tonight. A 3rd breach has been made since yesterday. At about 8 o'clock, we paraded in rear of the 52nd, and our regiment was directed to put itself under the orders of Lieutenant Colonel Elder, who was to command the reserve and who had orders to remain in some quarries till further orders. He, however, neglected those orders and followed the column to the breach, bringing his reserve into action with the main column. The defense of the garrison is universally allowed to have been very good. I received 3 wounds early in the attack, viz., 1 in the right leg, very slight, 1 in the left arm, and 1 in the chin. After lying on the ground, I was at last helped off by a sergeant of our company and, with the assistance of some of the 52nd Band who were coming with bearers, carried to the hospital tent, where my wounds were dressed. I was then put into a tent for the reception of wounded officers. The firing continued for a long time after I was carried off. At last, as I have since understood, the 3rd Division having got into the castle, the enemy deserted the breaches, and ours and the 4th Division got in without further opposition. 7th. I remained in the tent until the afternoon, when I was removed to our campground. That concludes the first part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of content.